and thank you for joining us at this press conference with a group of human rights experts on Nicaragua. As you may know, the Human Rights Council established the group of experts on Nicaragua in 2022 to investigate all alleged human rights violations and abuses committed in Nicaragua since April of 2018. The group presented their latest findings to the General Assembly this morning, and now they're here to answer any questions that you may have. Here with us today are the group's chairman, Jan Michael Simon, in the middle, and here on my left is Ariela Peralta Di Stefano, and seated on the far side of the table is Reed Brody. We'll start off with opening remarks by each of the experts, and then we'll open the floor to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Good afternoon. We would like to thank the media for their continued interest in Nicaragua in this, despite these international, very eventful times. Ladies and gentlemen, let me draw your attention to something which we have addressed already in the interactive dialogue this morning. And this is that the Ortega Murillo regime, as part of its strategy, has demonstrated a cynical and calculated approach to international cooperation. They have been leveraging Interpol, anti-money laundering, and counter-financing and terrorism cooperation frameworks to persecute transnationally opponents. And this includes abuses of the Interpol's red notice system and the circulation of false alerts on travel documents, misusing a database dedicated to this by Interpol. They have also been circulating misinformation to trigger anti-money laundering compliance warnings within the financial compliance systems, leading to freezing of closure of bank accounts and of their targets. At the same time, and this within months, Ortega Murillo have been withdrawing from several United Nations agencies and the Human Rights Council, including disengaging from the Universal Periodic Review. And what does this dual strategy of using and abusing international mechanisms tell us? First, and more evident, the goal is to avoid scrutiny and accountability while continuing to perpetrate human rights violations. But the second point, which is less evident, is here more important even, and this consists in a direct and aggressive challenge to the international legal order. It responds not merely to an administrative or diplomatic disagreement, but to express profound disregard to international obligations. This strategic goal perverts the principle of mutual trust in international cooperation, undermining the integrity of global security systems. It undermines the very foundation of international cooperation, which relies on trust and adherence to human rights principles. This particular strategy of transnational expression needs to be addressed by the international community. I now hand over to my colleagues Reed and Ariela.
Yes. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you for following our report. As we emphasize in the statements of the group before the third committee, the fourth phase of the repression, which started in 2023, continued to this day and is focused in consolidating absolute control in the executive power. We continue to raise alarm over the increase of simultaneous mass arrest and prolonged incommunicado detention. Authorities have refused to disclose the fates and whereabouts of these dozens of detainees with amount to enforced disappearances. The resurgence of enforced disappearances is one of the most alarming developments we have seen since the group began its mandate in 2002. We have documented at least 74 cases of enforced disappearances. In 27 of these cases, the individuals remain disappeared to this day, In addition, we have received credible information indicating the enforced disappearance of additional 9 individuals. These cases are not isolated. They are part of widespread and systematic attack against civilians, meeting the threshold of crimes against humanity under international law. It is important to underscore that international human rights law does not require a minimum duration for an act to qualify as an enforced disappearance. In this regard, the November 2024 detention of at least 40 political opponents whose whereabouts were concealed for 2 weeks constitute clear violation of international law regardless of their duration. Arbitrary detention is something that also raises our concern. Since 2018, over 5,000 arbitrary detentions had been recorded in Nicaragua. These arrests, often violent, warrantless, and politically motivated, target activists, religious leaders, journalists, and opposition figures. The repression has been institutionalized through coordinated effort involving police, judiciary, and legislative bodies. We pointing out physical violence against exiled Nicaraguans. As a result, a climate of fear has spread through Nicaragua diasporas, and no place in the world seems safe for those who oppose the government of Daniel Ortega and Rosario Murillo. Something that was pointing out was the murder at his home in Costa Rica of Mayor Zancam on June 19, 2025. According to the Attorney General of Costa Rica's strong line of investigation is that this assassination was ordered to satisfy political interest. He also noted that it appeared to involve higher individuals who act somewhat clumsily, less professionally than usual, yet effectively. And before passing the floor to my colleague Brady, Nicaragua, as we mentioned, has a large scale of using the arbitrary deprivation of nationality as a mechanism of targeted political repression is really an exceptional in scope and systematic nature. So I pass the floor to my colleague Reed.
Thank you. Daniel Ortega and Rosario Murillo have systematically dismantled the last remaining checks on their power, consolidating total control over Nicaragua through widespread human rights violations. They now rule over the judiciary and the legislature. They can suspend all rights, call in the army for police actions, and deploy so-called voluntary police as enforcers. They have transformed Nicaragua into an authoritarian state where no independent institutions remain, opposition voices are silenced, and those who resist, both inside and outside the country, face persecution, forced exile, and economic retaliation. The state and the ruling Sandinista party have virtually fused into a unified machine of repression, operating a wide intelligence network, surveilling the population, and selecting the targets for violation of rights. Since 2023, the government has extended that repression far beyond its own borders, targeting Nicaraguans abroad simply for being perceived as opponents. That campaign has unfolded through a series of cruel and vindictive measures. 452 persons have been deprived of their nationality by court order. Others stripped of their nationality without any legal process. Hundreds, if not thousands, of other Nicaraguans abroad have been refused the renewal of passports or access to other official documents, rendering them de facto stateless, stripped of their legal identity, livelihood, and rights, and prevented from rebuilding their lives abroad. The murder in June of retired Army Major Roberto Sancan, a vocal critic of state repression, marked the fourth violent attack on an opponent in Costa Rica. His murder has deepened the climate of fear that now pervades the Nicaraguan diaspora. An invisible hand seems to follow exiles everywhere, denying passports, cutting them off from their homeland. Our reports have identified 54 officials responsible for grave human rights violations, abuses, and crimes. In addition, Nicaragua's large-scale use of the arbitrary deprivation of nationality as a mechanism of targeted political repression is a manifest violation of the UN Convention on the Reduction of Statelessness. And we are urging states to bring Nicaragua before the International Court of Justice for that violation. There must be accountability. Thank you.